Let's take a journey through the life of an author who has a gift for weaving tales that resonate across generations. Raised in Bakersfield, California, she grew up rooted in the values and traditions of her Mexican heritage, a rich cultural influence that later blossomed into the beautiful worlds she creates in her books. This celebrated author is a two-time recipient of the Pura Belpré Medal, a Newbery Honor, and the prestigious Kirkus Prize. Her stories like Esperanza Rising has been adapted for the stage, touching hearts in theaters across the country. She has been honored with the Virginia Hamilton Literacy Award for multicultural literature, among other prestigious accolades for her contributions to diverse voices in literature. Most recently, she was named the ALA 2024 Children's Literature Legacy Award winner. Please help me welcome Pam Muñoz Ryan.
So happy to be here. Thank you.
Pam, your stories often carry a deep sense of heritage and personal history. Could you share some of the books or authors from your childhood that first inspired your love for storytelling?
When I was in elementary school so many years ago, curriculum was very different then. Elementary schools didn't always have a school library. I didn't really discover the public library until fifth grade when my family moved across town. So I was very fortunate, though, that at that point in my life, I became what you would call an obsessive reader. But I think I was reading to cope with my situation, a new kid on the block, new kid at school. Um, and also, living in Bakersfield, California, where during the summer it's 107 degrees, during the summer. And so I, found myself riding my bike to the library to escape little sisters, little cousins, and the heat because the library was air conditioned. So, I mean, certainly that was when I really, really fell into books. And I think it's really interesting that I now write for the age I was when books made the biggest difference in my life, that fifth through ninth grade. Also, before that, though, I was lucky enough to come from a strong oral language history, meaning both of my grandmothers were great storytellers. And so I spent a lot of time, especially with my Mexican grandmother who just lived a few blocks away, and also with my other grandmother as well. And both of them were wonderful storytellers. So I think that that also influenced me.
You've written over 40 books, many of which are beloved by their cultural richness and emotional depth. Was there a particular moment or experience that solidified your path to becoming an author?
Well, my path to becoming an author was very long and circuitous, meaning, first of all, like I said before, curriculum was different when I went to elementary school. So when I was a young girl in elementary school, we did things very differently. Today, students write across the curriculum. They write journals in school. They have family literature nights. They make books at school. They have author visits. I think I would have loved all of those things. It just wasn't part of how education was then. And so I sometimes I'm jealous of the kids today because I look at their writing and it's so fluid. And I think that they are so much farther ahead of me than I was at their age. I didn't really know that being a writer was a job you could have when you grew up. I didn't know anybody that was a writer. And it really wasn't ever presented to me as a job. I loved books from fifth grade on. I was what you'd call obsessed with them. And I knew as early as high school that I wanted to have a career that had something to do with books, but I really didn't know what that might be. I thought it might be working in a library. I thought it might be working in a bookstore, although I didn't have a bookstore in my town at that time. I thought it would be teaching because teaching seemed to be an avenue where books would be really accessible. So I considered that path. And that's actually what happened. I became a teacher and I did that for 5 years in the Escondido School District. And when I moved to San Diego area for college, after college, it wasn't until I went back to school to get my master's when my kids were really little. I still knew in my heart that I wanted to have a career that had to do with books. Still, I didn't consider writing them. And so I went back to school to get my master's in post-secondary education, which I did. And when I completed my master's, one of my professors asked me to stay after class one day. And we were chatting, and she said, "Have you ever considered doing any professional writing?" So I was a mom with four young children before anybody had ever said those words or suggested that to me. So it was as if she planted a seed that wouldn't stop growing. I couldn't stop thinking about the possibility of writing my own stories. So I was a very late bloomer when it comes to writing or putting my stories down on paper. And so really that's how it happened. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I started researching how to get published. Much more difficult back then. There wasn't the internet or anything. So it was always going to the library, checking out the writer's market, um, talking to anybody I knew that had had a book published and writing the story, starting to write and spending a lot of time writing and rewriting.
Esperanza Rising and Mañanaland have impacted readers around the world. How do you approach weaving your cultural heritage and family history into stories that resonate universally with readers?
Well, not all of my stories reflect my half Mexican heritage. Some of them do very specifically. Esperanza Rising, I'm very sentimental about that because it parallels my grandmother's immigration story. So, of course, that one does. Um, I I do it, I think, on an organic level when it really lends itself to the story. Certainly, like in my picture book, Mice and Beans, about a Mexican grandmother who's getting ready for a big party. And so, I mean, some stories certainly lend themselves to it. Some of my books, like Paint the Wind and Writing Freedom, don't necessarily reflect my heritage, but they were such compelling stories and they were so intriguing to me. So I will tell you when I write, of course, I can't change who I am. All of who I am will come out, in my stories. But my biggest focus and concern when I sit down to write a novel, and my biggest desire is that I want the reader to want to turn the page. And so some of my stories that lend themselves to my heritage, um, I'm certainly always thrilled to have the background and to speak two languages, to have that cadence in my work and have my work reflect that. And in my other books, say like Amelia and Eleanor Go for a Ride or Writing Freedom, Paint the Wind, When Marion Sang, they were such compelling stories. And so many of the women in those stories were such kindred spirits to my own grandmother or, some of the characters in some of my books that are Mexican.
As someone who celebrates diverse voices, what are your thoughts on the recent surge in book banning and challenges against multicultural literature in schools and libraries?
Very disconcerting sometimes because there seems to be a blanket approach. Here's the thing, we're preparing children to go out into a diverse world and to live in a diverse world where there are many different kinds of people that they will meet in school, in their jobs, in their communities. So by giving children a lot of different stories that reflect a lot of different culture and traditions and upbringings, we're giving a reader tools to face a future world. So I mean, I'm certainly an advocate for not banning books. I'm an advocate for agency and for choice. I'm an advocate and an ally for librarians who struggle to defend their positions, especially in public settings. It's difficult for me to wrap my brain around why those views should then affect, say, in a public school, everybody else in the school. I don't begrudge anybody the right to make a decision for their own especially their own young children. That's their right. But it's hard for me to accept that in a public setting that I or anyone else has to accept that view.
Most of the ways that books get banned are from concerned parents
Oh,
that
right. Well,
push their ideals onto everybody. So you're 100% right.
I mean, Esperanza Rising a few years ago in North Carolina was banned along with Rita Williams Garcia's One Crazy Summer. And it was a parent advocacy group who didn't go to the school, by the way. They went to the press. And the reason they wanted our books taken out of circulation was because they said that they portrayed ethnic class struggles, and they didn't want their children reading about ethnic class struggles. And when they interviewed the principal on the news, the principal was very confused. He said, these two books have been on our school, they've been vetted, they've been used as part of curriculum for, over 10 years at this point. And it, but the district had to bend. They ended up having to put my book and Rita's book on a relegated list where you could only read it with signed parental permission because this parent advocacy group did not want their children reading about ethnic class struggles, which seems to be a very narrow, whitewashed view of what children in this district can read and not read.
Outside of your work as an author, what are some of your favorite ways to spend time or unwind? Are there any hobbies, interests, or traditions that have become especially meaningful for you?
Well, I live near the Pacific Ocean, and so I like to go for walks on the beach. I love to travel. This last year, I was in the Galapagos, and then just a couple of weeks ago, I just got back from Malta and Sicily. So I love to travel, and I'm trying to think. Well, I have four grown children and their families, and six grandchildren. So it's really fun to do things with them. And I read a lot. I love movies. Yeah.
As we wrap up, I would like to thank you for sharing not only your incredible journey with us, but also the wisdom and your heart behind every story
Oh,
you create. Your books
thank
have
you.
become treasured companions for readers young and old, offering a sense of belonging, resilience, and curiosity about the world. We're grateful for your commitment to giving voice to diverse stories and for inspiring us all to embrace the richness of our own background. It's been an honor to have this time with you. Thank you so much for bringing such beauty and meaning to children's literature.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.